Right, welcome back to the workshop. I know it's been a while. I can't remember exactly how long it is since I last released a video about the FoxBobba, but that's what we're going to be doing today. Back out here. I don't know if you remember in the last video. I'm sorry about these lights, this glare, this is fucking shit, isn't it? Okay, stand down. Right, in the last video, we got as far as stripping the gearbox down. Took all the components apart. Yeah, struggled with those clips. I don't know if you remember that. Go back, watch that video. Struggled with the clips, but we have actually invested in the right tool for putting them back on, so we're not going to be struggling, hopefully, as much today in the reassemble. So yeah, as you can see, all the parts are laid out on the bench. In fact, let me spin this camera around and let's have a little bit of a... So, here we are. Let's get ourselves in position. So I've relayed some white paper down onto the bench top. It makes for a good contrast so that you can see the bits real clearly, as well as it's a nice clean surface to work on, nice and bright. So I've redrawn the lines. This is to represent this end piece here. Don't know if you remember the lines that I drew. And then we've got an M line and a C line. Now we're not talking about motorcycle clubs, we're talking about main shaft and counter shaft. And this is the order that all the gears come off of those shafts. Over here we've got all the spacers. These large circlips are for the bearings going in there, and then we've got these smaller circlips. I can't remember exactly how many of them there are, but you're best off ordering new ones, which we've done. We've got 4 roller bearings over here. They're like in a plastic cage, they're real stretchy. 1 spacer, the gear drum, and all the what do they call them, like the gear forks, the selector forks, to go back on once we reassemble that part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself sort of set up here in the cameras with the GoPro and things like that. I've got my tools. I've read through the manual, because this is all I do. You know, I don't know this stuff off by heart. I just read the manual, sit down, and then I do it. But hopefully in such a way that you can follow along and possibly build your own gearbox if that's what you need to do. And that's the whole idea of all of these videos. In fact, if you can go back and check over any of them and hopefully find some information that could help you out whilst building a 883 Sportster. So yeah, the Fox is back. He's out helping me today. Yeah, so let's get the camera set up and let's get building the gearbox. Back to the bench. Yeah, so I showed you all the components laid out from disassemble, and like I said, go back and watch that video if you need to see how it comes apart and get all the components laid out in the correct order. Basically, what I think is going to be the best thing to do is go through building this and just following step by step the procedures laid out in the manual, and I'll do them as kind of little sections, if you like. So we'll do a section and then we'll sort of transition into the next bit and things like that. So I've got all my new components laid out over here. The only thing that I have pre-done before filming this was putting the main shaft and the counter shaft back into the door, trap door, whatever. I can't remember exactly what it is they call this. But putting these two back in, the bearings have been pressed in. I do have a press at work that I've used in the past, but to be honest, these are not exactly like something that requires a press. You can hammer these in if you have like a socket that is large enough to fit over the top and drive them in. That is perfectly fine. That's exactly what I did. I just drove them in with a copper mallet and a socket. Last thing to do on these is just to install the snap rings so that they are well and truly secured. I've filled these grease up with a load of the assembly lube, the Lucas assembly lube. So hopefully that will give us a bit of a helping hand on its first start up. So it shouldn't cause any abnormal wear for us. Shouldn't really need too many tools for this to put it back together. Let's get that last bit of clips sorted there. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. Okay, shouldn't really need too many tools to assemble this. Just those pliers to put the circlip back on, and now the C-clip pliers to put those other those other nasty clips that we fought with last time. Like I say, in the instructions it says that you need to get new ones of these, which I've done. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 of them that you're going to need throughout the build. So yeah, I suppose the best thing to do is actually get stuck into it. So when we look at this, the way this is set up, the longer of the two is the main shaft, and the shorter one is the countershaft. The first thing it's going to ask us to do is to take the spacer. It's the larger of the spacers when you disassemble the gearbox or the transmission, whatever you want to call it. And it does recommend that every single part that we put on is well lubricated before it goes on. Like I say, we're just trying to prevent any wear, because it's going to take some time to actually pump some oil around this engine on the first start up. So if we've got some assembly lube in there, then we're giving it a fighting chance, aren't we? So that collar slides all the way down up against the bearing, right to the very bottom there. And then the next thing it's going to ask for is not lubricant, is one of these split bearings. They're like in a plastic cage. They are flexible, they have an opening so that you can open them and stretch them round. So yeah, again, on that recess, if we just get a nice big dollop of the lube on now, and then feed that over the top, drop it into the hole, and then just turn it around a little bit, and hopefully that's going to spread all that assembly lube around the inside. I feel like when I do this I should have some really bad 70s porn music or something playing. But right, so on to the first gear. This last one, this large one, sorry. So this was the last gear to come off, and we can identify this because there is another gear which is similar on the countershaft, but there is a very easy way to tell these apart. The one from the main shaft has these 2 grooves here, and the one from the countershaft only has 1 groove. If I offer them up to each other, there is a size difference too, and it's the smaller of the 2. Let's put that back, make sure I got it right. It's the smaller of the 2. Look identical, slightly smaller diameter, and identified by the 2 grooves on this outside. And it's that side there, the 2 grooves, which are going to go face down onto the bearing. So again, more lubricant. This is going to be the general story of today. Lube it and then put it on. Be careful of these splines on the shafts, because they are razor sharp on the edge, so they would easily mark or damage the inside of these gears. So that's now seated on that roller bearing. Next thing it asks for is one of the shims to go on top of that roller bearing, or on top of the gear in fact, because the roller bearing's inside. And now, I don't know how close I need to get to the camera for this, I'll try it on that camera first. You can just see the recess in those teeth there, or if not, if I come up here, you can see that space has gone on, and then just above it you can see there's a recess here, but there's also one just there. We need to put our first circlip on. So now this is how we see how good these pliers are. Yeah, new circlip, new pair of pliers, and let's see how this goes. Maybe there was a lot of swearing and cursing last time, so let's try this really small drift with some very light taps and just see if it, yeah, there it goes. Yep. Does it want to pass the other side? Yes, it does. Okay. That's in there now. It's dropped into the recess. We now have our first gear on. Cool. It wasn't too painful, was it? Now just to assemble, what's that? 8 more. Right, let's see what the next chapter says. Slide main shaft first gear onto the main shaft with the locking dogs facing down. So again, more lubricant. This is the first gear. Okay, these are the locking dogs that it was saying, so these have to face down. Bit of lube in there first, just so we know that it will work properly, and then slide it down. So this is actually going to engage with those splines on the shaft. You can see there on the other camera as it slides down and then locks into position. I do hope it's all as easy as this. So next on the assembly, we're going to move over to the countershaft. The countershaft's already been pressed in, as we've seen here. This is the countershaft, already pressed in with the bearing and that. What it's now asking us to do is to take countershaft 4th gear. Now again, this does look pretty sort of same side from side, except for this also has a groove on one side. So when we drop this down onto the countershaft, we want that groove facing up so that the flat side will be against the door. So with the groove facing up, we would then drop it onto the countershaft. But first, need some lube. And that just drops down. Again, this locates onto that shaft via the teeth. That's cool. As per usual, just above that there is the groove for one of these circlips to hold in. Just hear it click into place here. And then again, another shim on top of that. Goes down. A bit more lube into the recess where the bearing goes. Another split bearing. Down into that first recess on the countershaft. Snap it into location. And give it a few spins round so it coats everything nice and evenly. Then we take the next gear, countershaft first gear, which is the last gear, which was very similar to the one that went onto the main shaft, but this is the one that was identified with just the single groove that we can see just there. This should now sit over the top of that bearing that we've just put on the main shaft, on the countershaft, and engage over there. So cool. Already we've got 4 different gears on. Staying on the countershaft side, got another one of the spacers. Drop that over the countershaft, down against that gear that we've just put on. Another retaining clip, and that will keep all that in position. Again, that just snaps down into position now, and that is now keeping those gears secure onto the countershaft. Just above the smaller gear on the main shaft, you'll see that there's another groove for a snap ring to go into, so we'll get that installed next. So far the first 4 gears are on. We have got, let's get this right, at the very bottom gear, this one here, main shaft 4th, with main shaft 1st as well installed, countershaft 4th and countershaft 1st. So back on the main shaft we put that snap ring just into that groove there. There'll always be one of these thrust washers that goes on top of the snap ring. Then there's a recess just above it that you can see just here, where we'll put another bearing inside. More assembly lube. Fit that bearing in. Then we're going to go for main shaft 3rd with the dog tooth or the locating pins facing up. That will now drop onto the main shaft over that bearing. Bit of a spin, that just gets all of the lube around the bearings, around the inner race of those of that gear there. Next up, countershaft 3rd. This has got 2 sides to it. It's got 2 lots of locating pins on it. You have this side with this recess here, and then also this side which is kind of just coming off the gear like that, or that side with the locating pin. We are going to drop this down that way with the this larger, because this recess here is actually where one of the shifter forks is going to go once we put the shifter drum in. So cool, just drop that on there. Again, it's got splines on the inside, so it is going to mate up with that shaft perfectly. It won't spin on the shaft. Again, back on the main shaft, just above that gear, that 3rd gear main shaft that we've just put on, there's enough space for a spacer to go on first, and then a circlip on top of that. So that 3rd gear main shaft, because it has a pin underneath it and a pin above it, that one cannot move on the shaft at all. It's just engaged with it constantly at all time. It's the counter shaft that moves in and out, engages it with either, I suppose it'll be 2nd on the other side, or 4th that we've already put on. Or was that 1st? I can't remember, but the gear below it basically. Back onto the main shaft again. We've now got main shaft 2nd gear, and this is going to be installed with the groove for the fork selector facing up. Okay, so I'm just sitting here editing the video for putting this gearbox together. I know it's a huge mistake at the end of it, but because of the way I've now decided that I'm going to be dividing this video up into 2 different sections, I need to drop a little snippet in here. So I've just shown you 2nd gear going onto the main shaft with the dog tooth facing up, with the recess for the selector fork to be able to slide into. It's not until I actually get the gearbox assembled and start putting the drum onto it to be able to select gears, I realise that I've actually put that in round the wrong way. So the rest of this video is going to carry on with it in the wrong way. So just remember, I've told you to install it with the dog tooth up. You actually need to flip it over and put it with the dog tooth down so it engages with the gear below it. Cool, keep watching. So back onto the countershaft side, we're now getting, we've only got 2 more gears to go on really. We're up to here with the dog tooth facing up for the gear selector, but you can see just up here we've got a groove. We need to put a groove, the split circlip into there with a thrust washer on top, a bearing in there, and then we can drop in countershaft second gear as well. Okay, so that only leaves us with 1 gear now. Countershaft fifth. It's flat on one side, you can see this face here, just perfectly flat, and then on the other side there is a groove. This goes with the groove facing up, so we drop it onto the countershaft and the groove is facing out. Again, this has gears on the inside, so it constantly engages. Put a little bit of assembly on there. Drop that final gear on, and then that is held on with the last of the retaining clips. Well, it's taken me as long to build that gearbox as it has to remove, as it did to take me to remove some of these clips in the original disassembly. And with that satisfying click, there it is. So countershaft fifth is the last one that actually goes onto the gearbox. After that we've got main shaft fifth, which is this one here, this large gear here with 2 roller bearings already pressed inside it. One at this end and one which I do believe is pressed in from this end, because this is just a plastic cover. These 2 bearings are still fine. They've been cleaned out, they've been in the ultrasonic cleaner, and then they've also been coked up with some grease in them as well. But this actually gets pressed into the case. So this is our excuse me, this is our final bearing, this is our output shaft. So on here we'll have either the sprocket or the pulley, depending on what type of drive system we decide to use. I'm sure Ryan said that he wanted to go for a chain conversion, so we'll have a sprocket on this, because this will be on the outside of the engine and all of this will be on the inside, and this will be in that one of those bearings that have already been pressed into the case when we built it up. So yeah, so just for now I'll just put a little bit more lube on now onto these faces as well, so we don't want anywhere and we'll drop that on, so that's nice. It won't spin properly at the moment simply because gears are engaging that shouldn't be engaging. There we go. If I move that out, we get some rotation. Yeah, it all depends on what gears are engaging with what. There we go. Got a bit of free running now. So what I'll do is I'll put some of this assembly lube actually onto the gear faces themselves. Awesome. So as I said earlier on in that little interruption where I got second gear around the wrong way, decided that I'm going to turn this video into 2 separate parts. So first off, you've seen all the gears go back onto the main shaft and the counter shaft, and then next up I'll show you how to build the selector drums and things like that, but that's going to come up in another video because that's taking just as much time. I don't want these videos dragging out for too long, and the longer videos in the past haven't done so well. So at the moment we're sitting around 20-25 minutes. It's still long enough. If I add all of the drum on it, it's going to go into a 40-minute video. So keep your eyes out for that. That should be dropping pretty shortly. Yeah, just remember, please, if you could like, comment and subscribe. Yeah, share the love. It all helps. Thank you very much.